I'd been in Afghanistan for a few months when I was in a remote district in Bamiyan province, and the villagers said, "Sit down, can we tell you a story?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "We're going to tell you the story of $150 million going up in smoke." And I said, "Okay." And so they described how they'd heard on the radio that there was an announcement of $150 million coming to their village, and then they'd heard a few months later that the programme had been finished, but their lives hadn't been transformed. So they essentially became forensic accountants. They wanted to find out where the money had gone. And they said, and they might not be right, but their perception, and in these contexts, perception is everything. $150 million had gone to one agency, 20% went to headquarters, subcontracted to another agency, 20% went to Washington, subcontracted again, 20% went to England, subcontracted, very little bit of money left at the bottom. Used to buy wooden beams from Western Iran, even though they could have been bought from Afghanistan, shipped via one of the warlords' cartels at 5 times the normal cost of shipping. And eventually a few wooden beams reached their village. The wooden beams were too large for the mud walls that they could build. So all they could do, they said, is chop it up and use it for firewood. Now, that's an extreme example, but I went through all the UN agency projects that were put out, and a lot of them were like that. Sitting around, I mean, the UN on the political side was absolutely fantastic. Well, subject to some political misdecisions that we could, I think we are all debating now, like not to include the Taliban. On the aid side, the lack of transparency and accountability is terrible. The UN agencies sat around the table, they went, "This is great. We're going to be the ministries in the country for the next 20 years, and this will solve our agency headquarters financing crisis," because Jesse Helms had blocked the money in the 90s. So I think there's a real need, actually, for a call for reform of the UN agencies from the left, because we want it to work. And that's really been the story of aid, that billions of dollars have gone in, haven't reached the ground, and the Afghans are understandably very disappointed, very frustrated, and some of them are saying, "Look, is this a conspiracy? You couldn't have done this badly unless you tried to do it. Because you, the West, you're so smart, you can put a man on the moon. But how can you have squandered these billions of dollars?" I think my reading of the Americans is, I think Holbrooke and Hillary Clinton said 2 days ago, on Monday, that it was heartbreaking, this waste of money. Dick Holbrooke has said that it's catastrophic. So I think the moral outrage and dismay, now that they've sort of looked under the carpet, is there. Whether, as David says, they're going to be able to get the political will, because the way that aid in America particularly is programmed is so subject to Congress and the lobby firms and what are called the Beltway bandits, that it's going to be a hard nut to uncrack. I'm confident, exactly, if you take the budget and these programs like the National Solidarity Programme. In fact, Dick Holbrooke on the radio yesterday said the most important thing we're going to do is support the National Solidarity Programme. So I'm very hopeful, realising how difficult it will be. But you can get design right. Afghans are some of the smartest people I've ever met. Solidarity Programme. Each village has a bank account, and you give $20,000 to each village. It's about design, and I think it's possible to get it right. And well, this particular programme, there are 3 rules. The village has a village council. They choose to have a secret ballot election, so they're the ones choosing the democracy. It's not forced from the West. They have to have a quorum of the village decide on the projects, and they have to put an account up in a public place, so it sort of builds in the accountability. So I think it's possible to do, if we're really willing to redesign what we're all doing.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, the way that aid should be spent is it should be for the Afghans to account and to manage those funds themselves at a very local level, because that is the best way of avoiding these awful kind of subcontracting things. I mean, the moment it becomes a big thing, comes from abroad, of course it all goes wrong. And they are very smart and very capable of managing their own funds through the CDCs and so on, and that can certainly happen. And we do get it wrong. Even with the best will in the world, we make terrible mistakes even when we're trying to help Afghans. You know the story about the Garesh washing machine? Which is another classic. It's in my book, but this was 2006 when our boys, the Paras, turned up in Garesh for the first time, and they spotted in the local hospital a brand new washing machine, still in its blue plastic wrapping, which had come from USAID, it was a US gift, but it wasn't plumbed in, it wasn't working or anything. And they said, well, what's the problem here? I said, well, there's no water. And then at which point the Paras then said, well, that's no problem, we'll drill a well. This is a perfect, they call it a QIP, a quick impact project, something that can really make a great difference to people. We'll drill a well and we'll connect your washing machine. But to do that, because they were the army, they first of all, this is within the framework of the comprehensive approach, had to approach the civilian side of the approach. That meant diffing people, essentially saying, here we are with the Paras, we've got the tools, we've got the drills, we can drop a thing and get this washing machine going. And to their absolute amazement and fury, in fact, the answer came back saying, no, please don't do that. And the army saw this as civilian obstructionism. They were furious about it, saying, typical, bloody DFID people, they never do what they're supposed to do, absolutely hopeless. But the DFID point of view was, hang on a second, the real story here is that it's not just that there's no water, there's no electricity either, so you can plumb all you like. It's not plus, if you do happen to get this thing up and going, you will put a dozen women out of work who have been washing the sheets by hand in this hospital forever, and they are the only breadwinners in 12 families, and that's 12 people out of work. Plus, if it's the British Army doing this, that hospital is no longer neutral, which is a problem in that part of the world, because the hospital are very anxious to keep the neutrality. It went on and on like this, but the two sides, civilian and military, could not get their act together about this Koresh washing machine. And I think to this day, I think it's still actually, it's blue plastic in the hospital, but things went back to normal. But it's an illustration of how difficult it can be, even with the best will in the world, to kind of help out. Things can be much more difficult than they seem.